All right, so my daughter's car is in the shop, tore down. We're waiting on a new. Ended up ordering a new variator for it, just because the spare one I was going to use had more wear on it than the one we were going to replace. So we're waiting on that. Should be here next week. In the meantime, we sold that $1,500 Land Rover to a friend, and he did some towing with it. Ended up towing a dump trailer several trips with some cement, and developed a coolant leak. So I'm thinking he probably overworked it. I wouldn't call these concrete haulers. At any rate, he told me he started seeing a drip. So I said, well, he thought it was oil. So I said, have you had to add any coolant? He's like, yeah, actually I have been adding coolant. I get the low coolant light. So luckily, he says no overheating ever happened. There's no, I drove it on and off the trailer. There's no smoke or steam coming out of the tailpipe. You don't smell any coolant. Right now, if it was a blown head gasket, I could see this kind of overflowing and spraying. We don't have any white residue anywhere from coolant. He just says he gets a low coolant alert. He pulls over, adds coolant, and then he notices a drip on his driveway. So I went ahead, knowing the Land Rover 5 liters need the rear crossover pipe replaced, the front distribution pipe, the water pump connection. We're going to replace all that today. It's already had a new thermostat, but we're going to change everything else out. First, though, I'm just going to see if I can identify where the leak's coming from, and if I can, I'll tell you, I'll show it to you. I'm not crawling underneath this vehicle today because we are working outside on the gravel. If I need to, I might do an oil change on it, but first we're going to fix this. So I got most of the parts in, but I think the only parts I'm waiting on is the intake manifold gaskets and the little connection piece between the water pump and the oil cooler, engine oil cooler. So we can get it all tore down and see what we can do. Okay, so I decided for this video is going to pertain only to the cooling system. I'm going to do a combustion leak test on this. I'm pretty sure the head gaskets are fine, but you know, it's not. I wasn't driving it when it happened. So the idiot light on the dash is not going to tell you until it's too late. So I'm going to go ahead. It's got coolant. It's at the lower cold mark, so I don't need to necessarily add any. So what we'll do, I'm going to take it for a test drive, get it warmed up, get some pressures going, monitor the temperature, of course, while I'm doing it with my scanner, and then I'll bring it back here and do my combustion test and see if I can record that for you. It is windy out here. We'll see what we can do. If I have to, I'll voice over. All right, let me go take it for a test drive. Okay, so we're getting ready for a test drive. Engine's running. I got my scanner set up for monitoring coolant temperature and oil temperature. So once we'll take it for a test drive, get up temp, and then bring it back and do a coolant combustion test. All right, so I decided to cut my test drive short because I could smell coolant, and I had the heater on to make sure I could monitor it, not even just get into the main highway and the start blowing cold air. Underneath, you need to see it dripping onto the exhaust. It's coming off the back of the engine. It's part of that rear crossover pipe, but it's just puking it out. So we'll try to do a combustion test on it right now, and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so you can see I got it all ready to go. It's only heat down here, so I'm just going to squeeze it for, I think it's 2 minutes, and then if the color changes from a blue to a yellow or green, we got a combustion leak. So I'll catch up with you at the end. Okay, so we did this for 2 minutes. You can see it's still blue, so we can be relatively certain that the head gasket's okay. With the amount of coolant that's puking off the back, I'd say it's that rear crossover pipe, which is pretty common. So like I said, I'm gonna start tearing it down now. I got most of the parts, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, so I pulled the engine cover off. Just lift up on the front, slide it back. It comes out of the hose back there. So not a big deal. What we're going to be doing is we got to get to what's down here, the water pump. There's a crossover pipe underneath here. It goes from the engine block to the water pump, thermostat housing, and then there's the crossover pipe that goes between the cylinder heads on the backside. So to replace all this, to replace the 2 plastic pipes, which are prone, we need to remove the intake. You don't need to remove the intake if we're just doing the water pump, but I don't want to have to deal with the cooling system, and we know, I mean, I kind of expect to do this one every 100,000 miles. I'll change out the crossover pipes on my Land Rovers as a peace of mind. Change out the front rear crossover pipes, change out the thermostat, and change out the water pump. So that's kind of my thoughts. Kind of the cost of owning a Land Rover 5-liter. So to get to the intake, to get to these things, we have to pull this off. So you just need to loosen this nut driver, or this number 7 nut driver works on this one, and this one. Pull that out, but when you're careful, you got to disconnect your PVC hose and make sure you don't break this coolant line here. And then we'll get that out of the way. Then we'll move our fan shroud. We'll have to drain the cooling system and go from there. So let me get the easy stuff, and then once we get into the more detailed, I'll kind of describe it to you. All right, so here's what I'm at. Took the intake assembly off. Here's the connection for the PVC that you had to disconnect to watch the coolant line. And I took this upper coolant line that goes across to your reservoir tank, top of the radiator, over to here. This is a plastic clip that holds it on this end, and then 2 hose clamps. So I pulled that off, pulled the upper radiator fan off, or shroud off, and then I took this upper radiator hose from here to here off. So next, disconnected my fan. You got to remove the fan just to give us room, because we're going to have to get the fan removed, then this pedestal, because the water pump drive belt routes around a pulley behind this pedestal. So we'll pull this off, pull the stretch belt off and that pulley, pull that pedestal off. Then we can use the tensioner to release the tension on the belt. So that'll get everything off the front. We'll have to disconnect this hose here. Again, we already replaced this, so we got to disconnect. This is the pipe that we're replacing that goes underneath the front of the intake. So we'll disconnect this. This goes to the water pump, disconnect this, and then that should be everything we got to take off on the front, except for the water pump. We'll do that probably we might drop the water pump, and then we start working up here, taking the intake pieces off, and I'll show you how I do that. But let me get this fan off again. On this one, it's naturally aspirated. The fan is reverse thread, so to take it off I need to turn it clockwise. So all right, so I got the fan off, got the upper shroud. You can leave the lower shroud. Pulled off that pedestal, loosened off the belt, then pulled off the tensioner. Tensioner allows you to get access to the water pump bolts. So as you can see, I went ahead and removed the water pump as well. So that's all disconnected. You got to be careful. This connection goes into your this thing's not focusing. That thing goes inside your water pump right here. So just like an airlock fitting or something, push the hose and fitting in, then hold this black ring here against the water pump, and then the pipe should slide right out. So you don't want to break that. But all right, I think I got to I unplugged the harness from throttle body to this. I think this is maybe the map sensor, and this vacuum line here. Disconnect from here, just push it out of the way. We did remove the crossover fuel line from bank 1 to bank 2. You have to remove that out of the way. It's a number 17 on both sides and 2 Torx bits. Next thing we got to do is take this vacuum line off, and then I think we just take it off here and then rotate it up. We got to disconnect this one and move it off to the side, because this actually plugs into the back of your intake. And then we'll disconnect this. That should be for the knock sensors. We got to take these 2 screws off here, and then disconnect some fittings and hoses back there. So we'll get to doing that. I think I'm gonna fire up the air compressor first and blow air down around this intake to make sure no debris falls into the cylinder heads. All right. So we got the intake out. You can see we didn't mess with the knock sensors. You just got to unplug it here, and then this unplugs on the back of the intake. I'll show it to you. You get these 2 unplugged, pop this off Actually, this goes right here, so you didn't need to pop that off. But this one plugs into the back of the intake. This attaches to the intake, so this little Christmas tree. You want to take that off. Your hose from the intake goes from the throttle body, travels along the bottom, and then it goes across into these little guides and then connects to that pipe. So you just take that off, pull your pipe off. So now there's 2 Torx bits on each side to take this off. Right there's one of them. So we'll take that off. Kind of weird. We got this liquid, but it doesn't smell. It feels oily, but it doesn't smell. But I think what was happening was they were putting concentrated unmixed coolant in there, not a 50-50 mix, so it feels real thick and oily. It doesn't smell like oil, doesn't smell like coolant, which is kind of weird. But even the coolant that came out of the water pump didn't smell like coolant either. So hopefully we don't have any other leaks. Once I get this pipe off the back, I'll get the inspection mirror out and see if I can find anything. We gotta disconnect that electrical connection. I think that's like a heater control valve, so we'll have to do that. But yeah, let me get these pieces out. And then for this, it's just 2 screws. So we'll change this out after we replace the one in the back. That way, if I lean against this, I don't have to worry about causing any damage. All right, so we got this out. This is your rear crossover pipe. Not seeing any obvious signs of leakage here. There does look like possible leakage. I'm gonna see if I can figure out a way to pressure test it. But again, you got 2 bolts, Torx 30. That 2 on each side to hold those on. You got 1 electrical connector here. This is the hose that comes from the intake or throttle body along the bottom of the intake. And then this is a heater hose, which is that one right there. So those are your connections. You're gonna want to make sure you remove the old seals. These on this engine were stuck to the back of the cylinder head, so I just got a pick and pulled it off. 1 on each side. So that's how you remove that. Again, initial inspection, I don't see, this is just really dirty and gummed up. I'm not seeing a specific leak area. Oh, so I didn't have to remove the hose clamp. You have this fitting here. Sometimes I find it easier to remove the hose clamp. So, because these get bound up, I'll get some WD-40 in there, let it sit, and then that'll pop off and be able to put that on the new one. So, all right. I'm gonna get an inspection mirror and just do a good inspection on the back of the cylinder heads, make sure there's nothing, no other issues here. So, all right, so I used an inspection mirror and inspected everything back there. I don't see any issues with anything. So it could have just been leaking from that manifold, or it could be leaking from here and then running down and draining off the back of the engine, because this was full of coolant. So I'm guessing maybe we were leaking from here. I put a little bit of air into the oil cooler, and I got coolant flowing out of these passages. I guess there's a slight chance that my oil cooler could have gone out, but I'll have to drain the oil and see if, maybe I'll do that now, because I was planning on doing an oil change on it as well. So I can pull the drain plug and let it drain, and then that'll tell me if I got any coolant in the oil, cross contamination. So I don't think that's it. So I cleaned up this fitting, took it off the old crossover pipe, so I got it good and clean. I'm gonna put it back on the hose, so this just will lock onto my new one, which is right here. So it's got the O-rings, or seals I should say, installed. There was some coolant staining on the bottom of one of these ports on the old one, so it could have been leaking from where the seal is too. So something to keep in mind. But all right, I think I'll go ahead and drain the oil, and then I'll button this back up. Okay, so I got the new crossover pipe in. Let me show you what I use to take it off and put it on. So it's a 1/4-inch drive, flex head ratchet, 3-inch extension, and then little Torx 30 bit that fits on my 1/4" drive ratchet. You got to reach over this way to do these two. You can get this one from here and then reach over the top to do the outside one on that side. Before I put my bolts in, I locked in the heater hose that goes to the plastic. So that is it for that. There's a Christmas tree that holds this cable keeper wire loom in to the back of the pipe, so I snapped that in. I connected my electrical connector here. This goes to the back of the intake. So now I'm gonna use my Torx bit T30 and take off that screw and that screw, and then there's one right, see if it'll come out in the camera, right there, the center there. Take those 3 bolts out, disconnect this hose clamp, and this piece will come out. It might be tough, you might have to pry on a little bit, just be careful, but they get seated in there pretty good. Well, we pull that out, and then we can put the new one in there, and then we're waiting for the intake gasket parts and water pump sleeve. So we might be stopping here until the mailman shows up. Let me get this piece swapped out and we'll go from there. All right, we just ran to the post office to get the last few parts we were waiting for. So it's intake gaskets and this little aluminum piece with a new seal. So this is the old seal I just pulled off, and I did find a flat spot. Let's see if I can get it to come out on the camera right about there. You can kind of see, I think looking at it like that, you can see a little bit of damage. So I don't know, it might have been leaking by this. Just gonna see how it's deformed right there. So that's one option, possibility, but we're gonna put a new one on. It goes right onto that pipe there. Let's see what else. Yeah, so I think right now we pulled the old front pipe off here. So now I think we can put the new pump on with this new piece here. We can get that set in and then put this front plastic pipe on, and then we can put our intake and put everything back together. I want to do a vacuum test. Hopefully we got all the coolant leaks that could happen and go from there. All right, so we're getting ready to put the new water pump on with our new fitting. So I put a light coat of dielectric grease on my seals that go for cooling. So that one started. I didn't slide it all the way back because it'll slide in there and seat itself. And then this one will slide in the back of the water pump. So what I do is I stick it in the water pump first, just position it to where this half moon is actually like this, otherwise it won't clear this piece. I'll take some brake cleaner and a rag and clean the surface here so I get a good contact with the new gasket. They got new bolts that come on this, so yeah, we'll just slide it all together, hand tighten the bolts nice and even, have it slide back. It all kind of slides together. So all right, so we got the water pump on. You can see how it's all seated on there. This is that piece in between. You got a seal in here and a seal in there. And I think they redesigned the shape of the seal in one of the updates, but they call it a water pump update, so I don't know if they changed something else in there too. And this is a new water pump. I got it all torqued down. 9 foot-pounds for the water pump bolts. And then you'll just want to put it all in this straight, and it'll carefully slide back and seat itself. So that's done. So I'll pull my rags out of there. I'll put that front pipe on, clean up the intake spots, and start putting the intake back together. So I got my water pump on, got my hose coming off the water pump connected. This is all in there. So these are torqued down to 9 foot-pounds. So next thing I'm going to do is clean up the surfaces here. One thing I didn't say I did was I don't think I said, prior to pulling my intake bolts out, I blasted, used compressed air and blast as much down in there as possible in case there's debris. This one was fairly clean anyways, but it's still good. That way you eliminate the possibility of stuff falling into your intake ports. It's a big no-no. So all right, I am going to clean up the surfaces, install the new intake gaskets on the intake, and we'll start getting this intake back together. I'm gonna hope to try to get this done before dark. All right, so we got our front distribution tube here. It comes out front of the oil cooler, goes into our cooler line. I wanted to show you. So this comes without this plug, so you gotta order this. This is one piece. It's a Land Rover part number here. You'll need this part for if you're replacing this pipe, because the pipe doesn't come with a new one. And all it is, it comes with a little clip, and this has an O-ring on it. They call this a bleeder cap, I believe, so you can bleed the air. So I'm gonna go ahead and install that. I got it connected here. Then I'll clean this up, and we'll get the intake on there. Kean's replacing the oil filter, and we'll get a new oil filter, an O-ring on that, and fill it up with oil. All right, so we slid the intake in as we were doing it, and Kean helped me. He connected the electrical connector that goes on the back here, intake manifold. We hooked up the hose that goes across to the back on that manifold. Make sure that's all positioned right. So we got it all seated down, make sure nothing was pinched. I got all the intake manifold bolts installed and torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. So now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna connect my PVC blinds onto the manifold, get the fuel line on. It's starting to rain, so we're trying to hustle and doing this outside, so try to get as much done. Still got to put the screws back in here. You got to put the fuel line on and then put the screws there, and you try to get this buttoned up. Last night we finished it up as the sun was going down. Drew a vacuum and it failed the test. It would build about 12 inches of vacuum, and then would bleed off, and we could hear air hissing right here. So we pulled it apart, and well, before I pulled it apart, I checked the old water pump inside the hole, and I found this. So this piece had broken off the tip, and it just came right out. So don't know if that's enough. So what I ended up doing, this is it broken, and then this is one I just pulled off of another Land Rover. So I'm gonna replace this one, put this on there, and do a vacuum test and see if that passes it. So yeah, you can kind of see if I can hold this so you can see the difference in lengths. So you can definitely see that tip broke off, so must not be going in there far enough to seal. So we'll get that swapped out and see if that fixes our leak, or if we have any other ones. Okay, so we replaced that hose. You can see how it's going in there. Got it all reconnected to the cooling system, drew a vacuum, and now she's holding. So I'm pulling about 19 inches of vacuum on it. So I got a new phone, so it's not quite focusing like I like it, but yeah, I'm sitting at 19. So I'm gonna let this sit. I usually let it sit for 15 minutes. If it holds it for 15 minutes, then I'm pretty confident in the cooling system. So while I'm waiting for that, I'll go ahead and put the fan back. I took the fan off because it was easier to get to this piece down here. So I put the fan back on, put the upper shroud on, and still looks good. Put the intake on. I need to put some oil in it, and then once 15 minutes is up, we'll put coolant in it. All right, we just finished putting the last half a quart of oil in. So we got 8.5 quarts of oil in. It's actually been, let's see, 20 minutes, and we're still at 19. So we didn't lose any vacuum, so I'd say that's a pass. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the fuel cap or oil cap back on, and we'll start filling it. So I know I covered it in the past, but I'll disconnect my air hose, leave the vacuum on the system, drop this down into my coolant jugs, and it'll draw the coolant into the system. And then there's still, typically on these Land Rovers, I'll still get an air pocket once in a while. This doesn't have the rear heating, air conditioning setup, because it's only a 5-seater. So I may not have that big of an issue, but I'll let you know. But once I get the coolant in there, I run it, maybe drive it around the property till it gets up to temperature, so I know that thermostat opens. And then if it gulps any fuel, or if it gulps any coolant, then I know I can top it off real quick. So then I take it on a road test. All right, so we got it running, no leaks, checked underneath. Coolant right at the max cold fill, where I put them. And still got to put the grill on, but I'm going to let it run, and I'll just drive around the property. I do have the heater fan on low, but the heat on high or hot. Let's see down there. Right now it's blowing cold air because the coolant needs to push the air out of the heater core. So that's why I like to have the heater open, the fan speed on low, just enough to where you can feel it. And you'll know once that starts blowing warm to check your coolant, because it'll probably gulp a little bit of coolant and you top it off. And then once it gets up to temperature, we will also feel these pipes, see if it's getting warm. Once it gets up to temperature, I'll top off the fluid again, the coolant, and then I'll take it for a road test and make sure everything's blowing through. I've got my scan tool just so I can monitor temperature. So if you're monitoring your temperature and maybe say you got an air pocket in there, it could be around the thermostat, so the thermostat's not opening all the way. Shut the car off if it gets up there, above 200 RPM or 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Shut it off, let it sit for a minute, check your coolant level, and then maybe give it 5 minutes. Sometimes it'll purge the air on itself. You can open some of the bleeder screws that are on. There's one on the reservoir tank, there's one on the heater line. Try to get that air pocket out. But if you're not careful and you just let it run expecting it's going to push the air on its own, it will overheat and possibly do damage to the engine. So that's why I keep a close eye on my coolant temperature. For some reason this scan tool gives me an estimated oil temperature, which I think is quite ridiculous because this does have an oil temperature sensor on it. So who knows? Biggest thing, like I said, we're going to watch this. I'm going to put the grill back on. We're going to pay attention, keep checking our heater to see if we got any. Like right now, we should have some warm air blowing out, but it's cool. It's the same temperature as outside. So we know we got an air pocket in the heater core. And that's why you want to have your both heater valves, because it's got two separate heater zones. And if you had a rear, you'd want the rear on as well, on high temperature. You can go high, that puts the fan on. I like to just do one step below, which is like 84. And then let the fan on low so it's not cooling it down, and you can sit there and wait to feel that temperature. You can see we're at 150 already. So I'm gonna go put the grill on, double check the coolant level, and then maybe drive around the yard to see if we can get this to push some coolant through it. All right, so I got up to 185 degrees and then dropped down to 180. I could feel the warm air coming out of the heater vents. Come back here, this pipe's nice and hot now. Check my upper radiator hose, it's nice, it's hot, so it's circulating. You can tell she gulps some, so I'm gonna go ahead and top it off to that upper cold fill. And because even when it's hot, it should be at or above the cold fill, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and top that off, pull it up to the house, and get ready to go for a test drive. Well, after several successful test drives, we have no coolant leaks. Temperature's maintaining itself. We've got all the air out of the system. So that's going to be a wrap for this video. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.